All right, we're coming to you live from a van down by the river. It's the night shift. It's 2:07 in the PM on the East Coast. But it's nighttime somewhere. Welcome. Welcome back. Ooh, there we go. We're back. Hey. I'm all merched out today. Welcome back to the night shift, gang. I've got my night shift mug. I've got my night shift. Remember in Wayne's World where Garth had all the Reebok stuff on? We will bow to no sponsor. Well, we have one sponsor here, and that's you guys. So that's not true. I've had offers. Other people have offered to sponsor, but I turned them down. How is everybody doing today? Looks like the chat is filling up. Whoa. Hey, everybody. You know what? Special shout out to Xander Jones for that tune and for this tune, which I'm calling Bed Loop 1. I'm just going to throw the bed loop down. We just talked about this. Now anything I talk about sounds so much more dramatic. It's been a crazy week. I gotta tell you guys. I'm so sorry that I'm always out of it. But I had a crazy ear infection this week, and it knocked me on my ass. And so if I look a little disheveled today, that's probably why. I had to go get I still have the sticker on this thing. Hang on. If anybody wants a hat, I'm going to tell you where to get them in just a second. Hang on. Let's lose this hat. There we go. That's a little easy. The hat just gets in the way. So I had this crazy ear infection. It was off the wall, unbelievably painful. It was so bad. And in fact, I woke up on Sunday morning, last Sunday, and I thought, I'm going to have to go to the hospital. And I went to the emergency room. And they gave me these gigantic amoxicillin horse pills, and I've been taking those, which just wrecks your stomach. And the pain was so bad. 3 days later, I'm back at my primary care, and my doctor gave me this steroid prescription to help, and that finally did the trick. And I was actually able to put these headphones back on and do some stuff. So, let's see who's in the chat here. All right, I gotta kill this bed loop. But it's cool. That's so cool. Let's see who's here. Chameleon UK, Reign of Rain, Brett Higgins, hello. Hello. Sage Sleuth, KT. Who else do we have? Paris Diamonds is here. Avi Z is here. Christopher Hovord, who just ordered a hat, and his hat just shipped today. Chris, you got to let me know what this hat looks like when you get it. I'm curious to see. By the way, if you guys are interested in the hat, you can just go to the website and you can go to merch. And the hats are right here. UK shipping is on now. You can buy these in the UK. This is the hat right here. I've got the beta, which doesn't have the Watchman in the logo. So my hat's a little bit different, but there's only one of these. And these are really nice. These are the snapback trucker caps. So anyway, if you're interested, and you may have noticed, I'm also sleeveless today. We're going sleeveless. I got my night shift workout shirt on, the muscle tee right here. This is the one. This is it for summer. If it's hot where you are, I'm in shorts. I got my muscle tee on. It's awesome. This is the way to go. If you're mowing the lawn, if you're just in line at the store, this is it. It's too hot for sleeves. I got to tell you. So, yeah, it's been a big week. I was contacted by a cult. I was actually contacted by a cult. They want to come on the show. I'm not sure. I'm not going to do it. I don't think I'm going to do it. It's the Raelians. That's who it was. The Raelians. There was a Netflix documentary about these guys. Uh, Rael, Rael, is the guy who leads the Raelians, or did for a long time. And there was a whole documentary about how, just like every other cult in the world, it starts out with aliens gave him some secret information about the future of humanity and the origin of humanity, and then yada yada yada, and he fucks everybody's wife in the end. That's basically how it works. And the guy's just a total piece of shit. Um, so that was the documentary. If you want to watch it, check it out. But those guys reached out to me. I said no. I don't know what it is with the cult thing. It's just wild. Dick Cheney sits atop the UFO pyramid. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Ooh, Czar. What is this? 199. New fan here. Love the content from South Africa. Backstabbeth. Wow. Cool name. I'm just looking at this. I'm like, wait, what? Welcome. Great to have you here. That's awesome. Thank you very much. South Africa. We've got people from all over the world. Where is everybody else from? We've got a bunch of UK people. We've got a bunch of North America people. We've got South Africa. We've got who else? Give me a shout out. Let me know where you are. Dick Cheney sits atop the UFO secrecy pyramid. Surprise, surprise. It's been a big Dick Cheney week. A lot going on there. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some really interesting new podcast information that came out of Matthew Pines. Remember Matthew Pines, the Center for the Bitcoin Policy Institute? Was that what it was? Sentinel One? Is that his security organization? This guy who popped up a little while ago. In fact, I think Vetted just did one on Matt Pines yesterday, or maybe it was today. I just saw that. I haven't watched it yet. We're going to talk about Matthew Pines and some new stuff that he's got to say. I'm coming around on this guy. I looked into him a little bit more, and I haven't had a chance to watch the full interview yet, but I've watched some parts of it, and it's very good. So we'll get to that in a second. And the Danny Jones podcast had Whitley Strieber on as a guest, and he had some interesting things to say about Chris Bledsoe. I want to talk to you guys about Chris Bledsoe. And the Matthew Pines thing goes all over the place. They talk about all kinds of stuff. It's really, really interesting. Touched on remote viewing. They touched on space exploration. It was wild. So we're gonna dig into that in a second. Sorry, I'm just all over the place this afternoon. Yeah, he's an interesting guy. Clay Weber, Matthew Pines is an interesting guy. I read this book. This was sent to me by Phi Trader, who is active in the comments and in the forums. And are you here, Phi Trader? Where are you? You here? Let's see if I've got this. Pull this up. UFOs are with us. Take my word. This is what I just finished this morning. I've been kind of reading it in the mornings as I get up a little early. And this is by Leo Dworshak. And I'll just read the back of this for you. It says, in 1932, two German-American farm boys in North Dakota made an otherworldly discovery that would change their lives forever. Oh, hold on. In 1932, two German-American farm boys in North Dakota made an otherworldly discovery that would change their lives forever. It was a dusky summer evening when the 12 and 8-year-old brothers stumbled upon a machine in the mountains unlike anything they'd seen before. Bigger than the Dworshak barn and round like a silver dollar, the contraption rotated and flashed multicolored lights. Something like an invisible fence prevented the curious youngsters from approaching the ship, so they sat and watched instead. Sat and watched as an unusual door opened and out walked 3 men. The Dworshak brothers observed this unearthly ship and its passengers repeatedly and on into adulthood, even going so far as to talk with the men and enter the saucer, gaining extraterrestrial knowledge along the way. Almost 70 years after the first sighting, Dworshak shares his awing account of close encounters with beings from another galaxy. Great read. It's very short, but it's dense. And it's just this. basically he writes down this story of what happened to him as a child in 1932, and when he and his brother would saw this craft land in a valley, and they would hike out to this thing. Apparently, it was is quite a hike to get there. It took a while, and so they would go out to see if they could spot it again. And every so often, they would hike out to the spot, and it would be there again, or it would come down and land. And they would observe it from a distance, and what they saw just melted their brains. They watched these beings that looked like regular people. It's a very interesting, detailed account of what he and his brother saw. But they describe what looked like men who were about 140 pounds, who were, maybe 5'9" ish, somewhere in there, all dressed in identical uniforms coming out of this disc, and basically doing some kind of work in this valley area where they were sampling bits and pieces of vegetation and taking measurements. And the boys didn't really know what they were doing, but they just saw them doing things like this. And this would happen again and again and again, day after day. And every so often, when they would hike out there, they would see it. Sometimes they would go out and they would see nothing. Almost nobody believed their story. They would tell their parents, and eventually their mother came around a little bit, but their dad was kind of not convinced. And most of the people they tried to explain it to weren't convinced. But over time, as the book goes on, as the story goes on, they build up sort of a rapport with these beings. And they describe getting closer and closer to the craft. And every time they would get closer, there was sort of like a force field that would stop them from getting too close. And he describes it as like you could see a rabbit would be jumping along or hopping along, and it would just bump into this force field and then would sort of bonk off and wander off in the other direction. And then at one point they get actually kind of trapped inside the field itself, and they're sort of frozen. It's almost, he describes it almost like being in sort of like jello. You're sort of in this field, and it just, they couldn't move. But they sat there and they watched these beings. And I found it really interesting because as they get closer and closer to the craft, they start to realize over a number of visitations to this spot that they're having thoughts that are not their own, that their mental processes. These are two young kids, 9 and 12 years old, and they're realizing that some of the thoughts that they're thinking aren't their own thoughts, and they're starting to feel the telepathic. He describes what basically is sort of the telepathic field around the craft where these beings are, where they can sort of pick up on each other's thoughts, almost like overhearing a conversation. The children could hear what the beings were thinking, more or less. The beings could pick up on what the kids were thinking, and they sort of had this open channel. It's really interesting, and he describes having downloads from these beings about their purpose in this place, and how the people from their galaxy, there are 12 of them that live here on Earth at any given time, or that are here at all times. They've been visiting here for over 5,000 years, and their job is to safeguard the planet and to make sure that the life forms on the planet itself are safe, and everything is proceeding according to whatever their plan is. And it's just really, really fascinating. And these boys get closer and closer to the ship, and eventually they're allowed to go on board the craft. They talk to some of these beings. It's explained to them sort of the situation that's going on, and how in the coming decades, humanity will learn more and more about their presence, and it eventually will all start to come out. And, for a guy who's, I guess, writing this in his 70s, he's recalling back to when he was a young kid, these memories, and he just wanted to kind of commit them to paper before his memory faded. It was just a really fascinating story. In particular, all of the focus that they placed on describing, or that he places on describing telepathy. Because we talk about it so much on this channel, how common that is. We're going to come back to the telepathy thing in a second, because Matt Pines talks about that a little bit. Actually, and even in the Dick Cheney thing, there's a mention of this to some extent. So we'll go there as well. But just a great book. This was sent to me, and I haven't looked and see if you can get a copy, but it's called UFOs Are With Us, Take My Word by Leo Dworshak. And it's basically just a really cool personal account of a face-to-face series of encounters with the same beings over a period of time, and this relationship with these beings that uh, develops as they go. I have another book here that Fight Trader sent me, Gods of Eden, which I'm super excited to start reading. But this one's not a quick read, so I'm going to have to spend some time with this. But thanks for sending those. Let's check the chat and see what's going on in the chat. Danny was the same with Ashton Forbes, and I understand the skepticism. It's a lot to digest. Shadow Patriot. Terry says, "What's up?" What happened here? Why is my chat all weird? There we go. Mads K, a new member. Thank you. Welcome aboard. Great to have you. Special shout out to all of our members. Thank you all for being members. You are the heart of Team Night Shift. Without you, it wouldn't really be possible for me to come do this. So this is, you know, it's a passion project. There is an enormous amount of work involved and time involved, and you have to be thinking about UFOs like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which is hard when you have a kid and you have other things going on. It's hard. Sometimes I just have to take my brain and turn it to the task at hand. So it's just good to know that there's such a support mechanism of people who actually are into this as much as I am. And I just, it means a lot to me that you guys are here. If you want to participate even more and get more deeply involved in the community, you can do that by joining the Discord, which Brett and Chris, I think, in the chat, maybe you could throw some links up for people if you don't mind. To join the Discord. This is a project that's been ongoing for some time. We finally got that up and running. We had to do some testing to make sure that we worked out the bugs. I think everything is pretty much smooth sailing from here on out. We've got a really cool little community over on the Discord, and we're working on some ways to make that more interesting and trying to figure out what kind of events and things we can do there. So I'm open to ideas. I'm open to suggestions. You can go there, hang out. Patrick and Pavel are in there sometimes, and we have a pretty cool little group in the Discord. So be sure to check that out as well. There we go. Chris Howard, thank you for that link. There it is. And there should be a link in the description in the show notes for this video. I'm looking at it through OBS. I'm not actually on the YouTube stream, but it should be in there as well. Hang on a second. I got to fix this ridiculous thing. There we go. That looks a little better. It's some kind of weird flock of seagulls thing going on. Rain of rain. Team Night Shift is killing it. Team Night Shift. What is Team Night Shift? Let's talk about that for a second. Team Night Shift is it's a lifestyle. It's a philosophy. It's a way of thinking. It's all of it. Team Night Shift is when I started the channel, I started it because I didn't know who else I could talk to about UFOs. I was talking to everybody. I'm talking to my neighbor. I'm like texting my friends from high school and shit. And they're just like, glossy eyed. They didn't, So I started the channel just to sort of vent about it. And as I started doing that, I met all kinds of cool people that just sort of came out of the woodwork and started to follow the channel. And that's how I actually wound up. I met Patrick that way and got to be friends with him. And then it just sort of grew from there. And I met Kelly Chase from UFO Rabbit Hole and some of the other creators in the space. And the idea of Team Night Shift was to basically like bring the audience into the conversation and to create sort of a campfire vibe here. And, I love to talk about all this stuff, but I don't have all the answers. I don't have really any answers. I just have a lot of questions. And I think that all of us together are able to process this stuff more effectively than if you tried to sit there and grok it all by yourself. And so I just thought, let's get as many cool people together in one place, and let's try to create and foster a really high level discussion about these topics and these ideas. And that's what Team Night Shift really is. It's not so much a club. It's just you take it seriously and you want to speculate and you want to kind of build out from there. Like, we're assuming this is real. We're agreeing that this is all happening and we're here for it. Now what? Where do we go from here? That's what Team Night Shift is about. So by hanging out, by being a part of it, by just chit-chatting in the on the Discord or in the comments, you're a part of Team Night Shift. You don't have to do anything too spectacular. It's just hang out. Shadow Patriot Terry, strippers. Did someone say strippers? Team Night Shift, Chameleon UK, Team Night Shift is Clint's support group. We're here to prevent him from freaking out about the phenomenon. That's true. I probably would. I freak out about it every day. I freak out about it a little bit all the time. I'm always a little bit sort of like, oh my God, is this really happening? This is really happening, right? I think that's the other thing. It's like the mindset too, right? It's what are we're talking about stuff that was squarely located in the realm of science fiction just a few years ago, right? Like if you were a science fiction nerd growing up, let me flip this around. Like growing up in the 80s and 90s, this is the generation, right? Like I've often said this kind of quietly to myself. This is the first time I've said it on this channel. COVID-19 lockdowns and the UFO renaissance that's happening right now was like the best thing that could have happened to middle-aged guys ever. Like guys in their 40s, like this generation, because we all grew up in the 80s and 90s. We all saw the same movies. We all watched the same shows. The X-Files was a huge part of my life for like a decade. That show changed my life. And now all of that stuff is, you're finding out that it's real. Flight of the Navigator, guess what? It's real. The telepathy stuff in this book that I was just talking about, UFOs Are Here, Take My Word, Leo Dworshak. There's a movie called The Explorers. Does anybody remember this movie with Ethan Hawke and River Phoenix? And who else is in it? Ethan Hawke, River Phoenix. 1986. I think there was Joe Dante. Who remembers this? Let's see if I can pull it up. We can find this. Go on YouTube, type in The Explorers, look up the trailer, Ethan Hawke, you'll see it. And in this movie, I can't show any of the clips because YouTube will ding me and I won't be able to do anything with this video. But in this movie, it's like 1985 or 86. I often talk about like soft disclosure in movies and television shows and how I'm pretty confident that that's been going on for some time to sort of prep people's minds for what's coming. But in that movie, is it Ethan Hawke's character? I think it is. Who has it? He goes to sleep and he has a dream. And in the dream, he gets a download. He gets a telepathic download from a non-human intelligence. This is in the movie. This is 1986. He gets this download and he wakes up and he sketches a circuit, like this circuit design that he then goes to his friend, played by River Phoenix, who is this science genius kid, and they build this thing. They build a device out of the dream technology that he dreams. And that device creates an orb. I kid you not. This is an orb. It's a sphere. It's a bubble. Looks like a glass bubble, but it's basically an orb. It's a force field. And in the movie, they basically figure out they can scale this thing and they can run it off the power of like a 9-volt battery, and they can make it floats and they can do things with it. So they create a little ship and they basically go inside this bubble and they're able to travel in space and do things. The second half of the movie is kind of silly, but the premise is all about dream communication, telepathy, non-human intelligence, getting downloads, creating technology from those downloads. It's a kid's movie, right? I talked about it on the last stream, Flight of the Navigator. I'm convinced Flight of the Navigator is soft disclosure because of the footage of the ship. Go on YouTube, type in Flight of the Navigator ship scenes, and just look at the Trimaxian drone ship and watch the scene. It's a 3.5 minute clip of just all the shots of the ship. This was Disney uh, putting together at the time the best special effects. Some of the earliest computer generated effects were done by Disney. They were done in Flight of the Navigator and Tron. And Flight of the Navigator, they showed the ship drop down from space and lands. No, it doesn't land, but it comes straight down from space in less than a second, and it stops like 5 feet off the ground. And then they show it again, and it goes from 5 feet off the ground, shoots straight up into space. They show it change shape it morphs into a different shape and then takes off at a super high rate of speed. They're showing you the maneuvers that weren't going to be described publicly until after 2017. The things that David Fravor is talking about now, these were shown in that movie back in the 80s. So you've got these are Flight of the Navigator. I wore out that VHS tape. Explorers, same thing. Star Trek, all that stuff. And now you have all of these revelations and whistleblowers that are taking place right now. And we're seeing all of that stuff actually turn out to be real. So anyway, I find as a guy at this particular age to sit there and look at the news and you're like, wait, is this really happening? It's kind of fucking with my head a little bit. So yeah, I'm always freaked out just a little bit. The 80s was the best. Mysterious World says the 80s was the best. Give me more tree. I really believe Star Trek is part of soft disclosure. It is too good to be random. I agree. And I'll tell you something else about that. Again, one of the other things that he talks about in this book is how when he and his brother meet these beings, they are immediately put at ease. They have some sort of a mental ability to calm the kids down and just sort of like put them at rest and relax their mind. And then they communicate to them in this very peaceful way that they have no concept. Well, they don't have they have a concept of it, but they just don't have violence. They don't have, they're beyond all of that. They're just this advanced, there's this highly advanced race of beings that just has gone on to explore the galaxy. That's what they do. Is it really so hard to believe that maybe Gene Roddenberry, when he came up with the concept of Star Trek, was actually getting some kind of a download or a telepathic, maybe not a download, maybe it's like a telepathic brain massage where, you just get sort of the concept, the idea. Weirdly, we're going to talk more about telepathy as we go. And it's weird how that ties in today. But it almost is starting to seem, and Matt Pines is going to bring this up in one of the clips I'll show you, that there is a fundamental connection at bottom, at base reality, that consciousness underpins all existence, everything. And there's a way to interact with that field. And the ability that humans may have is probably the result of evolutionary pressure to be able to communicate non-verbally as a hunter-gatherer group across distance and detect danger. And there may actually be biological, how does Lou call it? I think Gary Nolan says the caudate putamen, and Lou Elizondo called it the caudate putamen, or was the caudate putamen, was that the tournament that Van Damme fought in? The caudate. The caudate putamen, the region of the brain that's responsible for advanced planning and sort of assessing the situation that you're in and predicting what's going to happen next. All of that. So maybe Gene Roddenberry was getting downloads, and maybe that's what Star Trek was. It was a way of trying to create a concept, a conceptual framework in our mind for an advanced peak human civilization. built on high technology where our basic needs are met and violence is not necessary, war is not necessary, hunger is solved, sickness is solved, all of those problems that have held us back are solved. And then your biggest responsibility is to just find a way to better yourself and to make the world a better place. And so that's what Star Trek is basically about. Um, I don't know. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised. We have, Paris Diamond says, we've been groomed into this sci-fi through movies, but who's leaking info to the movie makers? I don't think it's being leaked. I think it's being given to them. I think it's being given to them deliberately. I think people, a lot of consultants in Hollywood, occasionally are plants. They might be working for intelligence agencies. They might be um, putting out little bits and pieces of things here and there. Apparently, ET was like this too. ET was another one where they were basically trying to warm people up to the idea of what a gray would look like without actually showing a gray. So what did they do? They kind of reinvented, they rethought what a gray is, and they basically presented it like ET. Because a gray is kind of scary. If you think about, like, if you're a little kid and you see a gray, that's terrifying. But if you see ET, not so bad. Or Alf, right? Alf, not so bad. So some of these were attempts to put the concept into a kid's mind or into children's minds early on that these beings are okay. This is what they sort of look like. Don't freak out. I don't know. It's been one of those things that has been rumored in Hollywood forever, and I just think there's got to be some truth to it. Spielberg has been fed truths too. Brian Park. Reagan said that everything that happened in ET was legit. Um, Science meets spirituality, an anomalous form for evolution. KT. So let's take a look at this Dick Cheney thing. Let me show you what I'm talking about. That one. Good Lord. Hang in there, gang. Where is it? I have so many windows. Here it is. Okay. That's the one. Okay, here we go. Walter Kern. This is the one I want to show you. Hey, it worked. Walter Kern is an American novelist, poet, literary critic, professor, and just all around kind of cool dude and brainiac. He was on a podcast recently where he, with Matt Taibbi, I think they hosted together actually. Bracket News, ATW Live on Monday. This was on 9/9. And he dropped this really interesting reference to David Grush, and this is what he had to say. Let me just play this for you. Oh, wait a second. Do I have this?
No, really, that's power. I'll tell you, I don't think it's a tale out of school, but it's kind of. I talked to a high-level UFO whistleblower last year, and I said to him, who among all the people in society is keeping this secret? Who sits atop the pyramid of classified information about UFOs? And I thought he was going to say something strange like the Grand Mason of the, Scottish Rite Lodge or Prince Charles or the Mossad. But he said, Dick Cheney.
Oh my goodness. Why does that not surprise me though? Because of course he would be, right?
Right. But this is like I don't know, Frank Sinatra.
Dick Cheney. So he's talking about David Grush. He was speaking to David Grush, and in another podcast, he goes into a little bit more detail about this. So let me click to that, and we'll go there. I think this is on. I don't know what's the original podcast this is from. It says James Paulos asks Walter Kern about David Grush, and their discussion is truly fascinating. So we won't go through the whole thing, but I'll just play a few minutes of this.
For even someone, whose job it is to kind of track this stuff, to separate out, to come up with any kind of coherent mental map to make sense of what's real and what's not. What's your experience been with this whistleblower guy? And I don't know, what advice can you give to Americans trying to dare to understand what's happening?
So I spent 10 hours with him in Colorado, deep in conversation, met his wife, found him very compelling, impressive, intelligent. He's a 36-year-old guy who has served at the highest levels of military intelligence, briefed presidents. He's testified before Congress. And his story is that he did a interdepartmental investigation of the UFO phenomena. Because he had so many clearances, he was able to go here and there throughout the government, throughout the military, throughout the intelligence world, and find out what was going on and pull all these compartments together and file a report. And he did that, and his conclusion was that we had all these craft hidden away, that there's been a craft retrieval program that's gone on, since actually the 1930s, that there are even bodies that have been recovered, that there may be some forms of agreement between our government and these other non-human intelligences, NHIs, that's the new word. And so he told me this whole story, a lot of it off the record, and I came away feeling like somebody had thrown a sort of mind grenade into my skull, because it's a reality melting prospect that there are other forms of life, some of them supposedly interdimensional, non-corporeal, a lot more like.
First of all, I'm totally gonna steal mind grenade. That's gonna be the new thing. Mind grenade. That was awesome. So far, he's just bringing us up to speed, but most of this we've already heard. But what he says next is really interesting. And this is one of those things that I always come back to when I say it's going to take all of us to process this. It's going to take all of us to figure this out. It's going to take artists. It's going to take engineers. It's going to take physicists. It's going to take regular people. It's going to take all of us, because each person sees it through their own the aperture of their own experience and existence. So listen to what he has to say next, because this is a very interesting what if.
About this, that we've put our sort of best defense contractors on the problem of exploiting the technology and possibilities that have been introduced by their presence. And there's a promise that we'll get to know more. I mean, there always is with UFOs. We are always a year away from the big reveal. But he assured me that that reveal is kind of got a schedule now. And in the next year will be accelerated in a way that the whole world will find astonishing. So what?
That's really interesting, because that ties right into Carl Nell's slide at the Soul Foundation and the phases of disclosure. And it's really starting to sound like we're on a timeline, like we're on a timetable. And what is that supposed to mean? There's some way that the world will find astonishing. The world will find it astonishing. Astonishing is a really specific word for a guy like Walter Kern to use, or for David Grush to use. It takes a lot to astonish people these days. I don't know. What would be so astonishing that it would change your whole worldview? Let's carry on here.
Well, because I can't see any evidence of it, except in his narration of the thing and you know, his assurances that various things exist. I can't, you know, I can't handicap the likelihood that we're all going to be convinced of this, but I will tell you that the information operation, whether or not it's backed by real craft and so on, is serious, very serious, and it's going to grow more intense. You know, you're already seeing Steven Spielberg has
the information operation. The information operation. This is what I've been talking about for so long. This is like one of the things that the first things I started talking about on this channel was how this is a coordinated effort. There is a faction that has broken free from the legacy program, a faction of people that are organized, they are motivated, they are well-trained, they are experienced, they are networked, they know exactly what they're doing. They are intelligence specialists and operatives, and they understand the method that has to play itself out, the process that has to play itself out, and they are rolling that out piece by piece by piece. This is an information operation. That's why it feels that way. I've always had this weird feeling about it, and it's been like I couldn't put my finger on it. I just could never quite put my finger on it, and I always hold back like 10% of just, I'm always willing to be swayed a little bit the other way if I see some compelling evidence. I don't ever want to say I'm like 100% on any one of these things, because anything can change in an instant. But like the News Nation thing, I've talked about it a bunch of times. News Nation, nobody watched News Nation. Nobody cared about news. No one thought about News Nation. It was like Fox and CNN and MSNBC and ABC News and, you know, the network news places, but it was either like Fox or everybody else. And then one day it was like News Nation was just the UFO channel. They just became this organization that was just, they were going to own the UFO UAP disclosure coverage. And what was that all about? This group of people, they spun up this sort of news organization. It seemed like out of nowhere. And then one day you turn on the TV and it's like, there's Elizabeth Vargas, and it looks very presentable, very professional. It looks exactly like what you want a news presentation to look like. If I was making a movie and I wanted to cut away to the news anchor delivering some news to really sell the point of what's going on, I would create something that looks like News Nation. It's not, you know, I understand that they were sort of a group of local or regional TV stations that, you know, there's a history there. But what I'm saying is somebody seems like they flipped a switch somewhere in that organization, and they were like, we are going to provide the official news look coverage of this issue. And I realized the other day, it just kind of popped into my head. What they're doing is they're branding UFOs. UFOs and UAPs have had a branding problem for decades. That's been the problem, right? The problem is not that they're misbranded. The problem is that they've been intentionally stigmatized by a deliberate, focused, well-funded media effort from the military-industrial complex, whatever the intelligence agencies, whoever is in charge of it, overseeing it, probably CIA to some extent. See Operation Mockingbird. to influence public opinion away from UFOs and UAPs, to make them seem ridiculous, silly, and just goofy. So people didn't take them seriously. It's a branding thing, right? So they were branded that way. And so for all of this time, we've been told this is not real. It's, it's on the cover of a tabloid newspaper at the grocery store. It's not something that serious people take seriously. And this group, this information operation that's going on now is undoing that. They're destigmatizing it. And that's a process. It takes time. And the people who can do that it's not just one type of person. You need somebody like a Lou Elizondo. You need a David Grush. You need a Chris Mellon at the top who can navigate the hallways of power in Washington. You need somebody like Walter Kern who can think like a writer and who can conceptualize things in different ways and communicate. You need people like that to start to deliver this message out and to filter it out. And that takes time. That's going to be a process. And then there's going to be another step to this process. Listen to what he says next. This goes on and gets better.
UFO documentary, I think on Netflix. I think there's another series being contemplated or in production about some of the first abductees. And so they're going to roll this out. And whatever the truth is, and whatever the actual nature of the phenomena, you're going to have to deal with it. You're going to be asked to believe, and you're going to be asked to believe by our authorities. They act as though they're all in conflict. Like there are some parties that want to get out the truth, and there are others that are stopping them. And that drama adds interest. But my sense of it is that there's kind of a consensus at some level about rolling out more of this, and the theater is a little distracting. The powers that be have decided we should know more. What if it's all a fairy tale? What if it's what if this is the first, government issued fairy tale? It wouldn't be the first, but the biggest. That has strange implications. It means that our very belief systems about ourselves, our past, and our universe are being re-engineered at the highest level. And you thought, if you want to be conspiratorial, paranoid, and skeptical about this whole thing, you would conclude that a substitute religion is being prepared for mankind.
Whoa! What? Hold up! A substitute religion is being prepared for mankind. I don't agree with that, but let's just follow that thread.
And even a substitute science, because I happen to know that what is set to come out involves, things like the genetic manipulation of the human being through time and so on. Really weird stuff.
You're sitting there with this grown.
I got to pause there. He's talking about, this guy spent over 10 hours with David Grush. And he's telling you, I know what's coming. I've talked to him. I know. And what's coming is going to rock your world. It's going to land like an alternative religion. That's kind of what he's saying. That's how I'm picking it up, right? It's going to land like that for a lot of people. That's big. That's really big. Let's go on.
Adult male.
Yeah.
He's married. From what you're telling me, it sounds like he didn't have, like boxes of moldering files and like old pieces of pizza hanging off of his desk.
No, he's not Matthew McConaughey in True Detective, smoking and sweating. And, you've got to understand. No, this is a very poised 6'5", 6'6", Air Force veteran, actually with a gun on his hip underneath his shirt. He's had problems. He's had people harass him and so on. He's got security concerns.
Did he at any point unzip his skin suit and reveal a lizard underneath?
No, I mean, Dave Grush is a
It just
kid.
sounds very calm, discussing things that many people would associate with the complete meltdown of civilization as we know it.
He's a guy from Pittsburgh, a working class guy from Pittsburgh, whose dad was a car dealer, whose family went bankrupt a few times, and got a scholarship, or actually used military, benefits to go to the University of Pittsburgh, and studied physics, joined the Air Force, fought in Afghanistan, rose to various positions of authority in these satellite intelligence services, and then did this investigation, left the government, and made it his mission to inform the world of what's really going on. And I had a pretty ironclad agreement with him not to talk about the things that he was not yet cleared to talk about. But he seemed normal in every way. I mean, hyper normal it would be almost the word.
Hyper normal is almost the word. That's really interesting because this is, again, Walter Curran, what I love about his description. It's so humanizing. It's so humanizing. It's one of the things that it goes back to that point of, like, how do you communicate this to people? Like, how do you make it real for people? You have to get real people to communicate it, and real people. I love the way he described that. It's like, this is a guy whose family had, they went bankrupt a few times. They his dad worked at a car lot. Like, it was just a classic, regular blue collar family in America growing up, producing this kid who is extremely bright, and then goes on to get an education and serve in the military and serve in the intelligence world. And he goes to Afghanistan and he has these experiences. And now it seems very fitting that this is the type of person who's going to be delivering disclosure, at least this small little ragtag group of rough and tumble rebels who's trying to make the disclosure happen, at least so far as it seems. And that's also the kind of the picture you get from Lou Elizondo, his publicity tour recently, is that he's a regular guy like you and me. He's got kids, he's got a wife, he's got bills to pay, he's got financial concerns, he's got shit on his mind, he's got to fix the car, he needs new tires. Like, we all have these. It's not always, the thumbnail for this show today is Dick Cheney. We'll get to Dick in just a minute, but the power dynamics here, it's like the people who work in these programs, the people on the bottom, the people who are at the mid-level stuff doing the actual work, are regular people, more or less. They're not Dick Cheney. And maybe that's just where it's coming from. They've decided that it's time to make it real and get it out there. So let's go back and finish this up.
It was like talking to the Hardy Boys, the All-American boy, the Wheaties box guy. He was the opposite of some kind of, obsessive, skin-scratching nerd who, had seen the light. He was just telling me this as though he'd been out in the field and seen a big deer and said, "There's some big deer out there," except they're aliens.
Yeah, here's the funny thing to me about this is who would not be surprised by the news that interdimensional beings, some of whom might not have our best interests in mind, have visited us and maybe extracted certain kinds of agreements or payments or whatever. Ancient Egyptians would probably not have been shocked to hear that might be true. Certainly early Christians would not be shocked by the idea that interdimensional beings with perhaps malign intent were among us, even some Christians to this very day. And probably, a host of other civilizations also have their own sort of myths and legends about these kinds of beings. So how much of breaking news is this really?
I like to visit the Hopi Reservation in Arizona maybe once or twice a year. And the Hopi, people might remember, have a religion that involves these Kachina figures, figures that represent otherworldly gods, demons, and so on. And when the people wear these costumes, they sort of are transformed into these figures which come from the sky, according to their legend, or come from these mountains near the reservation. And I don't think they'd be surprised at all. They'd find it absolute confirmation. I think what they're surprised by on the Hopi reservation are all the false gods of the modern world, you know. So it's not just sort of indigenous people or ancient people like the Egyptians and so on. It's pretty much everyone except modern America who would not be surprised if there are beings of another kind. I mean, you've got this sort of the intellectual leading light of the UFO movement is a French scientist named Jacques Vallée, who's written books about the relationship between the fairy religions of Northern Europe and the UFO phenomena. He's basically saying gremlins and trolls and, gray aliens seem to come from the same source. Whether that source is the human mind, another dimension, or another planet, he fudges. But in a weird way, the UFO thing is a return to a more primitive understanding of our place among a host of beings. I mean, this whole idea that people are alone on this planet and in this universe, the only intelligence, is a very new one. I mean, I defy you to find it in ancient literature. It's not, there are gods in the Iliad. Every scripture worth its salt over a certain age. It's really only us in the maybe last couple of centuries that think we're alone.
That's such a great point, isn't it? Like, what a great point that is, that we have gotten so far. It's like we say to my son, he gets too big for his britches. You get too big for your britches. We've created this materialist paradigm, and we've decided that all things that can't fit into a neat and tidy explanation inside the materialist paradigm can't be real, and therefore they must be some form of mental illness or fantasy. And we find out that historically, that line of thinking is sort of the anomaly. It's if you go back as far as you want to go in any culture, humans have been part of a web of life that includes beings that are above us and beings that are below us and beings that are adjacent and from other places. And so, yeah, this idea is relatively new, and it's for some reason taken hold in our culture, especially. And I think that maybe that's what's on the table. That's what's on the table here. It's like the telepathy thing. You say the word telepathy, it comes so loaded with baggage. It's like this idea of like sending a mental email or something to some other person. But I think it's a lot simpler than that. Like, if you think about the time, I watch it with my son a lot, and I think when I watch him just sort of by himself doing his little thing or whatever, it makes me think back to being a little kid. And when your mind isn't filled with bullshit and you're a little child and you're just sort of seeing the world for the first time and everything's kind of new, you're open to impressions that just come to you. And sometimes I think what we interpret internally as just our own thoughts in adulthood aren't necessarily thoughts at all. They're impressions that come from this other place, this consciousness level, this sort of in-between realm that we all have access to, this sort of consciousness internet that we're all connected to. And we've all experienced it. Everybody knows what this feels like. You don't have to think too hard. In fact, I would wager that most of your life, all of us here have had experiences that you have convinced yourself were not actually psychic experiences, but they were. And you just talk yourself out of it. You're like, it can't be. It just had to be my own brain. I think we're probably going to find out that that's not the case, and that ultimately we are tapping into something that we didn't know what to call it. We forgot the language. We don't have the vocabulary anymore to describe it, but it's there and it hasn't gone away, and it's never really gone away. And if you get really quiet and you meditate enough and you can calm your mind down and you can turn off the TV and you can put the phone down and you can just stop the bullshit and you can clear your head and get out into nature and just sort of relax. And all the religious teachers throughout history, what do they say over and over again? Meditate, meditate, meditate. Go out into nature, get to someplace quiet, get away from people, calm your mind down. And this information will come to you. It just comes to you. And then there's levels to it. You can get better at it. You can request information, and then that information will come to you. You can, before you go to sleep at night, you can focus your mind on the thing that you're trying to solve, the thing you're trying to figure out. You can go to sleep, you can wake up the next day, and then the concept will just come to you fully formed in your mind. Is that your brain subconsciously solving the problem? Or is that an impression that's being given to you by some outside force that is where you're tapped into? I don't know, but I have a feeling that there's more to that outside force, that psychic internet, than we have been taught. And that there is a real phenomenon there that plays itself out. And these other beings, these non-human intelligences, are probably just way more comfortable with it, way more familiar with it, and they're more adept at dealing in it. And so they maybe even have been able to construct technology that takes advantage of that, just like it would take advantage of any other physical law of the universe. I think there's something to it. Pavel gets into this stuff over at the Psychoactive Activo podcast a lot, actually. He talks about this. When two people think the same thing at the same time, telepathy, Rain of Rain, it's so wonderful to be in the presence of a child's mind. They are amazing. We have yet to find our way, not these ideas projected on us by who knows who for why. Da da da. Makes me tear up. It's been right there. Careful what you open yourself up to. Fight Trader. Hey, Clint, getting caught up late to the show. So glad you liked the book. First one I read on the phenomenon. Wait until you get through Gods of Eden, mind-bending paradigm. I got it right here. It's right here. I can't wait. I'm excited. Thanks, Fight Trader, for that. I hold my phone knowing a call is coming. Paris Diamonds. You know, they've done research on this, and I believe it was Sheldrake. Was it Rupert Sheldrake? Rupert Sheldrake, who he created this concept of morphogenic fields, and this idea that there are energy fields that we can't see. I'm probably butchering what he's trying to say here by my ham-handed explanation, but energy fields that we can't see but nonetheless are there are what organize life at a quantum level, and then it manifests in the physical level up here. But there is a set of experiments that they did where they would have these double-blind experiments where they would have people in a room, and then there would be a telephone in the room, and they would get a call, and the call would be coming from a person that was prearranged or randomly selected, and the person had to guess when the call was coming and who the call was coming from. And they've been able to demonstrate that it's statistically happened enough times that it was statistically higher than chance that people have some kind of a psychic connection to each other, and they can tell when a connection is about to happen, or call, or something like that. But Rupert Sheldrake has talked about this a lot. They've actually done the research on this, and again, all the stuff that happens at Stanford Research Institute. And we're going to get into remote viewing here in a second. All of that stuff. Oh, Pavel's here. Hey, Pavel. The main heretic of science. He and Terence McKenna were good friends, and I'm friends with one of his collaborators, Dr. Alice Gomez Marin. Oh yeah, a quick reminder for anybody who wants to, if you're joining us now and you haven't already joined us on the Discord, get with Chris or Brett. If you guys can throw up a link You can also find that in the show notes for this show. It should be there. For our Discord, you can go over and join us on the server there, and we'll get into more specific conversations in there. Okay, so we're going to move on. We're going to talk about Matthew Pines. Matthew Pines from the Bitcoin Policy Institute, who sort of came out of nowhere a few weeks back and started doing the podcast circuit and dropping some major knowledge about UAPs and disclosure. And it appears that this is just the latest development in this information operation that's going on. There's a podcast called, or YouTube channel, Mr. Obnoxious, which I found not obnoxious at all. In fact, I subscribed. They're great podcast. The media lies, governments mismanage, and our financial systems are failing us. In Mr. Obnoxious, Peter McCormack explores the new frontier of tech, money, and governance. Mr. Obnoxious. And in this episode, he interviewed, this just went up 22 hours ago. So I haven't gotten through the entire thing because I had other things going on, but I've got some notes here that I want to pull here. So we're going to look at a couple of clips. Let me get my my notes up. Okay, so I'm going to start with his background because that's what a lot of people have been asking about was who is Matthew Pines and why does he know so much about all this stuff? Turns out he's actually, he's got a really interesting background. So I'm just going to back up to, where is it? Here we go. Matthew Pines' background. And we'll start here to just sort of set the table for where we go next.
Especially.
Oh, and before I do this, I'm just going to go right to the very beginning. I'm going to show you this is the most important.
In order to mitigate this geopolitical risk, this technological surprise risk, we have to have a serious national plan for disclosure, for being increasingly transparent and having a more open, serious conversation about UAPs. Most people haven't been paying close attention, so it sounds kind of kooky. But if you've been paying close attention, you read the language and you listen to the statements made by some of our most senior national security officials and congressional national leadership, they're as serious as a heart attack. I mean, this is like no joke.
Okay, so here's Matthew's background. These questions are great. Like this podcast is excellent. They just have,
especially in the military system.
Can you talk about why you know all this?
Oh, so my background, I guess, we kind of just jumped right into this whole thing. I can sort of rewind the clock and kind of give a brief bio, right? So I studied physics and philosophy as an undergrad at Hopkins.
Even more that, were you into this as a kid?
Not particularly, no. I mean, I was a huge science and physics nerd. As a kid, I, read lots of, nerdy books. The one that I'd say that touched on this subject tangentially was a book called The Hunt for Zero Point by an aerospace defense journalist named Nick Cook, who, he tracked, U.S. military sort of aviation programs. He had lots of sources inside, say, Lockheed. And he wrote this really interesting book. I read it, I think, early in high school about trying to get to the bottom of, what were sort of the most secret U.S. government programs, right, in terms of our, stealth fighter jets and bombers, et cetera. And, he was trying to pick up on a number of, breadcrumbs that, pointed him in the direction of sort of fundamental physics, because I was a physics nerd. And so this hunt for zero point was the hunt for zero point energy. That was sort of the canard of that there was some, mysterious understanding of physics that potentially could be used to generate novel propulsion systems and, really radical sort of aerospace platforms. And so that was like the only sort of UFO book I ever read. It wasn't really about UFOs. It was actually just essentially a reporting about potential secret government sort of aerospace programs. But most of what I read was just science, physics, nerd stuff. Yeah.
And then from there, then
Yeah, so I went to Hopkins. I was going to do a PhD in physics, so I studied physics, and then I was interested in philosophy, so I did a second major there. I had sort of a crisis where I was like, I actually don't like the work of being an academic, even if I like the subject matter. And so then I sort of pivoted hard to doing something else. I went to London School of Economics, where I did a master's in philosophy and public policy to kind of bridge maybe into science policy. And so I came back to DC, and I got a job working for the National Science Foundation as a sort of a 2-year sort of fellowship, helping support the grants that the government gives out for basic research. But there I was actually supporting all of the economics sort of discipline research, game theory, decision risk and management sciences, like business school research. And it's usually a feeder program to other PhD programs. But again, I decided I didn't want to do a PhD. I sort of randomly stumbled into a college buddy of mine at a trivia night that we were working together, and my fellowship was coming to an end. He said, well, if you actually want to come, just work for the startup, we have some interesting contracts. We're a small, company, but we're going to be growing fast. And we do essentially war games for the government. Exercises is what they call it, is sort of the parlance. And I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. Get a clearance, work in DC, live in Clarendon, just kind of have a good, early 20s lifestyle. And so, yeah, that's kind of got my start working in sort of this area. And for about the next 10 years...
Can you talk about those war games? Like, how does that work? What's the structure of even... Is it thesis?
Yeah, so there's a program. It's actually managed by FEMA, but it's really for the National Security Council, because FEMA is sort of a
emergencies.
Yeah, so the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which is actually part in the U.S. of the Department of Homeland Security. FEMA, actually, its historical genesis was actually Cold War contingency planning, right? So it was stood up essentially by Nixon, or Kennedy, was sort of the civil defense, and then Nixon kind of formalized it into FEMA. But its original mission was sort of preparing for nuclear war, and then it sort of evolved over the course of the 20th century to take on increasingly more like traditional disaster response, like helping people with floods and hurricanes and tornadoes, and giving checks basically to people to rebuild their.
It goes on. This guy's brilliant. Like, brilliant. I'm going to skip ahead because he talks about quite a bit, and we're going to just skip ahead a few minutes here. Let's just
look at the specific sort of cyber threats that they face. What sorts of threat actors looking to target their networks, whether it's nation states or cyber criminals, hacktivists or insiders, and sort of assess, help them understand how their current basic security controls, their security programs, as well as their business strategy. Say joint ventures in China or their R&D systems, or who they have working on their sensitive programs, whether those are sufficient.
Who was it who was showing us their company that had the relentless attacks?
It was Chester.
Yeah.
So he works in cybersecurity for corporate clients at the high level of network security for these giant corporations, and his company, I understand, creates artificial intelligence projects or products that are used to secure these large networks and detect attacks, and to basically he is sort of a consultant in that sense. Like, he goes into these companies and helps them figure out what their security posture needs to be for the type of work that they're doing in the field that they're in, and the different theaters that they operate in, and what their challenges are. And it's kind of a unique thing for each company. And my sense is that he is part of that sort of gray area world between government and private industry. And I just get the sense this guy is connected out the wazoo. I don't know. He speaks with such authority and such a clarity of mind, and his delivery is so clear and crisp. He talks about this stuff in the way that someone who is extremely confident in their position talks about stuff. Like, he seems like a very confident person whenever he says anything. So we're going to skip to the next clip here, and I'm just going to jump around a little bit. He's going to talk a little bit about remote viewing. Wait a second. Do I want to do remote viewing next? Let's do disclosure process. Here we go. 106. We'll get to remote viewing. That sounds a lot like catastrophic disclosure to me. Does that sound like that to you? Are you hearing this? Let's see. Did you get all that? Here we go. Let's back up. Sorry, gang.
But it doesn't, it's like a slow progression of sort of establishing, maybe softening the cognitive territory, but necessarily isn't about transmitting detailed information to prepare, people professionally, which is, I think it spreads then awareness.
These things exist, or probably.
So our most senior national security officials and congressional, national leadership, they're as serious as a heart attack. I mean, this is like no joke.
But the wider public, outside of niche podcasts and people have a niche interest, haven't fully grokked the idea that these things exist, or probably still think it's speculative.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's going to be a process of slow diffusion. The way I sort of think about it occurring is sort of two main mechanisms, maybe intentional, may just be a side effect, is in networks, like, human society is a set of networks, and you can have information spread through what you might call like a process of percolation, or sort of high trust personal relationships. There's small clusters of people that are paying close attention to this, both in and out of government, in different positions of professional responsibility, and they develop high trust personal bonds, and they're psychologically disposed to thinking about this in a serious way. And so information, maybe more information, flows through those sort of personal high trust networks. And that spreads then awareness among certain professional circles to take it more seriously. And then there's a much more, I say, a slower process of diffusion into society more broadly, where people just pay attention to what's on their Twitter feed. Occasionally, someone like Lula Zonda will go on CNN or do like a 2-minute interview, and people will go, there's a guy in the Pentagon UFO program, there's a book, New York Times bestseller.
He's describing the information operation. The information operation. I'm like Matt Foley from Saturday Night Live. I'm gonna fly away here. He's describing the information operation. This is what it is. It's tiered operation. There's tiers of information being delivered to different demographic groups for different reasons. People in Congress are being told certain things that they need to know so that they can get their ass in gear and write legislation and have hearings and do the things they need to do. And down here at the level that we're at, it's people like podcasters and YouTube commentators and authors and comedians and whatever, digesting the message, processing it, handling it, having the conversations, doing the stuff that we're doing right here, and preparing people, just getting that information percolating out over time to get to a point where everybody kind of has a baseline acceptance of what's going on. But listen to what he says next.
Talking about UFOs, that's interesting. But it doesn't, it's like a slow progression of sort of establishing, maybe softening the cognitive territory, but necessarily isn't about transmitting detailed information to prepare, people professionally, which is, I think what's been happening in a separate channel.
Well, I think some people really need to see themselves for themselves, high quality, up close videos, perhaps a little bit like MTV Cribs, but with alien ships, where somebody's walking them around and actually showing the technology that exists, or maybe photography of little green men. They kind of need the full package to believe it.
Yeah, I mean,
which you don't think we'll get.
I think, well, there's lots of footage, there's lots of information that could be released. I think there's some information that could be released that would be increasingly suggestive, increasingly raise questions in people's minds, but I wouldn't necessarily say it would be like dispositive, right? I think to sufficiently trigger maybe a majority shift in a belief on this subject, you'd have to literally trot out the stuff. You'd have to open kimono. This is the craft. This is what we think, how they work. These are the materials we've recovered. This is what we think how they operate. Or, this is what we've tried to figure out. We'd have to really, truly open the door to these programs. But I think that's not going to happen, because to do that would also give away to our adversaries like what we do or do not know about those programs. And I also think there's an acute recognition that you don't want mass belief to shift so, radically. You want there to be a slow progression of gradual and incremental adjustment of belief on this subject, so that if you do get to the point where there's maybe a much more disruptive event or recognition of something exotic, that everyone doesn't just flip their beliefs overnight, and that people can react in
Because that could be too disruptive.
yeah, people could have a psychological reaction that wouldn't be desirable on a societal level.
That's what I was trying to play for you guys before. People could have a psychological reaction that would be undesirable on a societal level. And you have to bring people up to speed so that if something does happen, we could even go back and play that again, but I think you all heard it. If something disruptive does happen, there's not a sudden freak out at a societal level. If something disruptive did happen, that would be catastrophic, right? Catastrophic disclosure. What did Walter Kern say in that other interview when he talked to David Grush? He said something will be coming that will be astonishing, that the world will find astonishing. And if you go back even farther, John Lear said the same thing to George Knapp back in like 1989 in like the series. He did 3 or 4 interviews with George Knapp, and he said, there's going to be an event. There's going to be a thing. Something's going to happen. It's going to be astonishing. It's going to blow your mind. And when it does, no one will have any more questions. Like, that'll be it. It'll be over. I'm telling you, I have a strong feeling about this one. I think they know something is going to happen. And I don't think it means that we're going to show off what we have. They're not going to open up S4 and show what we're working on and do all that. But if the NHI just show up, John Ramirez said the same thing. If they just show up, Lou Elizondo has talked about it. If they just show up in 2027 or whenever, then all these private aerospace companies, the legacy program, they get to keep most of their secrets, more or less. Nobody has to disclose anything. It'll just be obvious at that point. We'll know that they're here, and that'll be that. And maybe it sounds like what Pines is describing is the gradual process of acclimatizing people to the reality that this is real and something is possibly going to happen. And so that when it does happen, there's not an overnight super freak moment where we just lose it and it all goes south.
Something you'd want to prepare for, right? This is why in the legislation that's being proposed, that's up for consideration again, probably in the next few months, as long as it gets built into a manager's package, just like it was last year, is for a controlled disclosure campaign plan. And it would establish a independent review board, a UAP records review board modeled after the JFK records review assassination board. But the membership that's specified in law is sort of a recognition of these different considerations, not just a national security official, a foreign affairs official, but someone who's is a historian, a sociologist, an economist, people representing civil society. That, the bill envisages a formal plan developed by this review board that would have collection, authorities over any UAP record in the government to take possession and make disposition decisions over any technology of unknown origin or biological materials, and make a recommendation to the president on a disclosure campaign plan. This is the way we recommend to the president which information we should disclose, declassify, in what order, right? And have all these different, individuals of, national sort of stature that represent these different disciplines, sort of elements of national power and strategic interest, come together and say, this is the sort of sequence of information that we want to disclose, to ensure, that we have a full, transparent process while ensuring, strategic stability. And that's what the law calls for, right? That's the process. If you don't have that,
he's talking about the Disclosure Amendment, the Disclosure Act, the
process, the formal mechanisms. You could have what one of the lead drafters of the bill called catastrophic disclosure. You could have just information come out that was not in a controlled plan process, but is just here it is. Now deal with it.
Of course, he's referring to Carl Nell, one of the authors of the bill, of the disclosure amendment. He's talking about Carl Nell and the catastrophic disclosure claim. I think we're all talking about the same thing here. I think we're dancing around the margins of the same basic idea. Something is coming. Something is going to happen. It's out of their hands. And if it happens before people are ready, there could be a catastrophe. It could be a complete mess. Is it going to be the end of the world? Probably not. Is it going to be the end of, is it going to be crazy on Wall Street? Probably. What does Matthew Pines do? He works at the Bitcoin Policy Institute. He's a cybersecurity strategist and consultant, and investor, advisor. Carl Nell was speaking to the ISALT conference on Wall Street. I think we're all looking at, I think we know what we're looking at. I mean, I think it's safe to say, like, we can kind of like sketch out the outline of what we're looking at, right? Like you can sort of color in everything else, and you can look at what the outline is. And you can go, oh, okay. This is about money. This is about Wall Street. This is about stocks. This is about currency. This is about the financial markets. This is about something coming that they may not be able to spin or control, and they need to get on the ground quickly. They need to get a framework in place. They need to make some disclosure happen to release the pressure from the system so that the whole thing doesn't explode when this moment happens, whatever that may be, whatever form it may take. I think that's what we're looking at. I think every time you look at a different one of these interviews, you're just seeing a different facet, a different piece of this puzzle. But we have enough pieces of the puzzle that you can sort of put them together and get a sense of where we are in the process. And there seems to be a definite sense of urgency. There's absolutely a plan. There's 100% a plan. It's being worked step by step by step. Carl Nell is at the center of this whole thing. And he was 20 years at Lockheed Martin and Northrop. And this is the guy who would be in the position to know. One of the very few people in a position to know. And all of the people who are in a position to know are basically saying the same thing, that this is happening. And we're just in this phase of the process. All right, so I'm going to skip ahead because this podcast is this is 3 hours and 10 minutes long, and he goes into so much stuff. I just want to get to the remote viewing part, and then we'll dovetail off of that into some other things.
Know about this group, Gray Fox, is like equivalent to that in terms of its selection selectivity, but it specializes in doing sort of behind enemy line.
Here we go.
Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff and SRI, and there's all these experiments the CIA brought them in to do. They trained a bunch of remote viewers. Lou Elizondo in his book describes how when he was recruited as a member of Special Forces, he was recruited into a particular program that codenamed Gray Fox, and he has that codename in the book, and that codename went through Defense Office of Pre-Publication Security Review. So I can say Gray Fox. I'm surprised to see that in the book, but like, it's been known that Gray Fox refers to an element of the U.S. Special Operations community that's among the more select, like elite groups, right? So Delta Force, people know about. SEAL Team 6, people know about. This group, Gray Fox, is like equivalent to that in terms of its selection selectivity, but it specializes in doing sort of behind enemy lines, close reconnaissance, preparation of the battlefield, very small unit teams, maybe 1-man, 2-man teams. Doing deniable covert operations. So Lou Elizondo was recruited into that group. The main his primary recruiter, who brought him into that group, talks about in his book, trained him in remote viewing as well. So he recruited him into this very select elite special operations unit and trained him in remote viewing as a tactical skill, right? Essentially to use it to plan missions, to understand if there are booby traps, to locate hostages, right? This is the functional application of this capability. He was never told how it works or why it works. It was just, you are now part of this program. We're going to train you in these certain visualization techniques that you will use as planning missions and conducting operations to keep you alive, keep your teammates alive. And that's as far as Lou cared to understand it. He's just, okay, this is what the U.S. government's going to tell me to do. I'm going to do it. If it works, it saves lives, I'm going to keep doing it. And so this is where, people scoff and they go, this is pseudoscience. This is, and again, that usually comes from a certain core functionalist, physicalist assumption, a certain basic mental model of reality that's like fundamentally local, deterministic, et cetera. That's kind of the inbuilt, worldview people have. And I just think that's probably not correct, right? I just think we know from separate strands and the limits of frontier physics and where we think philosophy of mind is pointing us at that there's, gaps in that physicalist paradigm. And that's saying that gap, is where, say, remote viewing fits, but at least open space for it to exist in a way that doesn't that I think should prevent someone from just quickly just dismissing it as, some flight of bureaucratic fancy, some spiritualist ideologues inside the government kind of got gripped by some delusion and kept perpetuating this, $1 million grift for many decades.
Is it because the skeptics are skeptical because of the limitations of their own ability? But if we look into the way whales and dolphins communicate with each other, they have a different way of seeing the world, and potentially there are some humans who have an ability to tap into something to see the world in a different way. Is this even is this a quantum thing as well? Could this be a tool, like a quantum tool the brain has? I
mean, people usually, anything sort of mysterious and woo,
blame quantum.
They sort of just go, it's quantum, it's a quantum thing. And I think that's just kind of like most physicists, that's where they kind of have a revulsion or an aversion to this sort of topic, because they go, oh, these people aren't serious, they're not rigorous. Like, quantum is just a deterministic set of equations. The Schrodinger equation, there's no woo or mystery in the Schrodinger equation. It's just, this is the Hamiltonian function, this is how it's evolving, this is it.
But it's got to be either spiritual or scientific.
Where I was pointing at is maybe an in-between, which is a naturalistic account of reality where the world isn't purely physicalist in the sense that it's not a purely deterministic set of physical states that evolve according to a mathematical equation, right? That's a valuable model for certain aspects of reality, but there are other aspects of reality that set of models do not properly account for.
That look, I am clearly, he is extremely intelligent and has far more knowledge than than I do. But I will say that we've been talking about this on this channel for a long time, like since the beginning of this channel. That's something that we've talked about, that there seems to be, I think that you can piece it together on your own if you read enough. Like, again, intuitively, I think most people, if you're comfortable with your own, if you've developed a spiritual relationship with nature and you have a connection or a way of connecting to, either through meditation or whatever your practice is, that you connect to the greater reality. I think people who can do that intuitively know these things. I think this knowledge is just there. And I don't think it's that far out. I really don't. I think it is in our culture. I think we've given up on the vocabulary. We've kind of given up on that way of thinking. But he's telling you remote viewing is real. It's real enough that the special forces units that are deployed around the world at any given time are trained to use it in their own day-to-day, where if it doesn't work, then he said Gray Fox is up there with Delta Force and SEAL Team 6. Like, Delta Force and SEAL Team 6 are the top of the special operations food chain pyramid, as far as I know. I mean, and Gray Fox is some Metal Gear Solid thing that is like even more secretive than that. And they're teaching their people remote viewing techniques that were pioneered at Stanford Research Institute with Russell Targ, Hal Puthoff, and of course, Ingo Swann, our favorite remote viewer. Spending millions and millions of dollars on this. It's got to be real. Like, they're telling you it is real. I think that's the thing. It's like we're all kind of just waiting for some kind of other shoe to drop where it's going to be like, okay, now it's like really real and it's going to change my day-to-day life. And I think it already can. It can already be a part of your day-to-day life. Like you'll find this in your own experience. It's not just limited to remote viewing. I think remote viewing is just one aspect of what you can do with these abilities. But first you have to accept that they're real. You have to accept that our picture of reality is incomplete, and that there are things in it that we can interact with that we don't have the language to fully explain scientifically, or at least by the methods that we're used to using. So we have to borrow some things from other cultures and other ways of thinking to kind of bring that into our world so that we can process it and understand it here. But indigenous cultures have been doing this forever. Like I talk a lot about, well, I don't talk a lot about it, but I talk about it from time to time. My ayahuasca experience for me was the big life changer. Like for me, that was it. That just clicked it for me. I saw things before they took place. I saw the future before it happened. And then years later, I lived that future and it happened to me, and I believed it. I had access to information that I should not have had access to, that was just downloaded into my brain. I felt this, experienced it. I know what it felt like. And I think if you go back far enough in your own experience and you just really get serious about it and you think about it, we've all had those moments. We've all had those moments where you're like, I'm thinking about someone and the phone rings and it's them. I used to do it when I was a kid all the time. I would hear a piece of music in my head. I'd hear music in my mind. Sometimes I didn't even know what the music was. And then maybe within an hour, 2 hours, sometimes maybe a day, I would hear it on the radio, on television. It would be in a commercial. It would be playing, and somebody would drive by and it would be playing out of the window of the car or whatever. This used to happen all the time. You get a feeling about a place and you just know not to go in there, or you get a feeling to go this direction instead of that direction. Or, and I guarantee everyone here has had this experience. I know you all have. You meet somebody or you're dealing with a person, whether in a friendship or in business, you're having interactions with people, and you meet somebody and you just know this person's full of shit. You just know it, and you can't shake it. And you'll know you're right. Your gut is right, because every one of us has not listened to that instinct and gotten burned. I guarantee you. You think back and you'll know immediately. There've been probably dozens of times where this has happened. It's happened to me, where I just had this feeling like, don't get involved with this situation. Don't do this thing. Don't take that, this guy, whatever there's a business opportunity. It's not going to work out. Don't go there. And in my own head, I'm like, no, you can't be negative. You got to really, just give it a try. And then later you find out, no, my instinct was right on that. I was absolutely right. And I've heard it explained another way that I thought was really compelling. Somebody said recently, I forget who it was, that that the notion of time, our experience of time being linear, is a false illusion, right? Like all time is happening all the time. So present, past, and future, it's all simultaneously happening in this. I'm going to use this term, but like this, like one big block of reality where all possibilities exists. And in that way of thinking, there's a version of you that's out there, a temporal outbounder that's in the future. There's a future version of you 5 years from now that's lived some experiences, that is able to connect backwards with you today. And we know that time doesn't necessarily have to run forward. It can run backwards, and causality can go in both directions. So future versions of you could be communicating to past versions of you things that just haven't happened yet, through the form of a burst of sudden emotion and a clarity of thought about something that you just don't expect, and it just comes to you in a moment of aha. I think that's telepathy to an extent. I think maybe I'm not using the right terminology, but more or less, I think that's what we're talking about here. Animals have this. Kids have this. They know when you're coming home from work. They know when you're coming home from the office an hour before you get, like right when you walk out the door across town, you go into your parking lot, you get in your car, you turn the keys. At that moment at home, your dog wakes up from a nap, goes to the door and sits down. Something is happening there. Do drugs, kids. Try MDA. Don't do drugs, kids. I'm just reading a comment. Most people are preconditioned to not go with that instinct. Hugs don't need drugs. And I'm telling you, like the drug thing, ayahuasca, mushrooms, whatever your thing is. All I can tell you is, like, in my case, when I did it, I think the each one of us is going to get there on our own time, right? Like, you're going to get there, you're going to reach that moment for you, and it's going to be delivered to you in an experience that is tailor-made for you, right? Like, you're listening to this live stream and you found this YouTube channel, and here we are having this really weird conversation about the Psychic Friend Network and UFOs and Miss Cleo. Call me now. Who remembers Miss Cleo? Anybody? And maybe that's just the thing that you need to get you to the next stop on wherever this is that you're going, this path, right? Like, I know that I've met a bunch of people in my life that at one time or another just gave me what I needed in that moment. They lent me a book. They were like, read this book, or they were like, watch this show, or they're like, here's a playlist I made for you, or here's, I'm going to tell you the one piece of advice that you need to hear right now. And I would just, like, connect with people, and these synchronicities would happen. And I think, to some extent, we're all kind of, you're living the movie of your own life, right? You're the main character in that movie. And the world delivers experiences tailor-made for your learning and progression and advancement as a being, right? This is what Seth Speaks, that book by Jane Roberts, is all about. The Seth series. It's just about, like, your belief structure is what gives your reality walls and solidity and makes it have a form for you. But inside that belief structure, your experience of life is going to play itself out, and you're going to learn all these lessons as you go. And I don't know. I think that for me, I had to go through the experience of really wanting some answers personally, and then I had to go through the experience of preparing for an ayahuasca journey, because that's what I needed. I needed it to feel like a ceremony for me. I needed to feel like I was purifying my body. I needed to go on the special diet. I needed to do all that stuff to clear the way for me to go in and have an experience that would show me that there's more to reality than just going to work and paying your bills and paying your taxes and then buying a new TV and a new iPhone. And, like, that's not it. That's not where it's at. And once I had that experience tailor-made for me, I was free. I was free to, like, let go of all those questions now, and I could just embrace this bigger reality that includes all of this new, these new things. So I don't know. For me, that's how it went down. But everybody's got to do it their own way. Okay. Let's wrap up. Oh man, I'm almost out of time here. I want to wrap up with I'm going to jump tracks here, and we're going to go to this clip from the Danny Jones podcast with Whitley Strieber. Let me see if I can pull this up. I think we'll end on this, and then I've got to bail for today. So the Danny Jones podcast, if you're not familiar with it, is awesome. Danny Jones, I believe he's in Tampa, Florida, actually. I think he is. And I've been getting into this podcast lately. He does these really great long, like 3.5 hour long interviews. They're just really, really good conversations. And he talks to everybody. So this is a clip with the recent interview he did with Whitley Strieber, who is the author of Communion. The book Communion, if you're familiar, it was made into a film with Christopher Walken. And let's just hear what he has to say about Chris Bledsoe. Check this out. Oops, where's my sound?
Also, there was a guy, I had another guy on here about a year ago named Chris Bledsoe.
I know Chris.
You know him?
Yeah.
He's
going to be on my show, Dreamland, in a couple of weeks.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Super sweet guy. I loved him.
Yeah, he's a lovely, lovely man.
He mentioned there was a person who I don't want to mention his name because I think that's what got his episode banned off my channel, or it's unsearchable now on YouTube if you search for our podcast we did together. There was a guy he mentioned on there who was very shadowy, who approached him and like became friends with him and his family, who was involved in many different agencies.
No, I know who you mean.
Yeah. Have you ever talked to this guy?
Yes.
What do you make of him?
I don't want to go there except to say that he's very sincere.
Very sincere.
Very sincere, and I'm not sure he knows whether or not he's telling the truth.
You don't think he knows whether he's telling the truth?
I think a lot of them don't. I think a lot of them are unintentional disinformation agents.
Yeah.
I think the visitors are heavily involved in all of those people, and they are controlling what they say. I don't think their minds are their own. You have to be very disciplined, and you have to know, you have to experience telepathy consciously in order to not fall victim to it. And it's very easy for these people to be parroting something the visitors are wanting them to say when, in fact, they think it's their own mind. And and I don't think the intelligence community is at all proficient in dealing with that. I wouldn't say I was proficient, but I do know when it's happening to me. I think I do, but I always tell myself, Whitley, be careful, because if you think you know, maybe that's when you don't know.
Right.
You know, so you have to be very careful. That's why when I talk, I try to only talk about things that have a definite memory. I don't like to speculate, because I think that opens my mind up to control. So I don't speculate.
Okay.
And I do not wish to be controlled, even by people who want me to say things I would like to say.
He's talking about Chris Bledsoe, and I believe it's Tim Taylor is the person they're referring to here, which is a longer story and for a different day. But broadly speaking, his comments on telepathy, I think, are apropos for this part of the conversation. He's talking about it's you got to go back and watch this entire episode because it's hard to pull just this brief little clip. But in the context of the discussion about telepathy, he's talking about that same theme, that your thoughts can somehow be influenced from outside of you by other beings who are more proficient at this than you are. And if we don't even understand that it's a real thing, and we don't know what it feels like to have a telepathic experience or to have telepathic communication, then you won't know when it's happening to you. And you can actually be under the influence of somebody psychically that can be implanting thoughts and impressions into your mind that may not be yours. And I think, I'm going to speculate here. Whitley says don't speculate. I don't agree with that. I think you have to speculate. We have to be able to game this stuff out, right? You have to be able to like start with what he just said and then go, okay, you have to, right? So if we're going to, this is something Pavel talked about recently when I was talking to him and Patrick, and I thought, man, this guy gets it. Pavel, if you're still watching, I just love the way that you put this. You said it so much better than I'm going to say it, but something along the lines of like, human beings need to mentally discipline ourselves. We need a different school of thought. We almost need like a Jedi academy for peak humans to like reach our full potential and to understand first like what that even would look like. And you would have to think about it like Shaolin monks or like Buddhist monks who have been spent a life. Look at like Buddhist children in a Buddhist monastery who are raised in that environment and how differently they process things, how calm they are, the way that they carry themselves, the way that they communicate. Their minds are just so much more switched on. And the Dalai Lama has actually participated in a number of scientific research projects where they have put monks in MRIs and various different scanners, and they've checked their brain activity during meditation. There was a great video on YouTube of somebody doing a demonstration of transcendental meditation, and they've got an EEG on at the time, and they show their brainwaves in real time react to going into a meditative state. And you can see it. It's like you can just watch the brainwaves just change instantly. And what I'm thinking is, look what our culture delivers to us. You look at your smartphone 650,000 times a day. You're swiping through things. We're constantly distracted. We're constantly atomized and disoriented, and social networks and social media and everything is just designed to keep you fragmented. And what does meditation do? Meditation allows you to clarify your energy field. You can focus it. You can bring it into a harmonic resonance in sort of a way that allows you to perceive more clearly what's going on inside yourself and within yourself, and also outside of you. And I think, again, we looked at Matt Pines talking about remote viewing, right? Think about Ingo Swann and his book Penetration, about what he said. He said that he remote viewed beings on the moon, and he was adamant. He was like, they are doing something to affect the way that we think. They're broadcasting something. They have a way that they are able to like affect our mental space. And it's almost like a dampening field. They're putting out like a static that just kind of dumbs people down. Now, this is what Ingo Swann says. And you just heard Matthew Pines describe the remote viewing program within the special operations community. So we know this is real. And we know what some of the best remote viewers in the world have said about it. Here's Whitley Strieber, who is one of the top figures in ufology, whose book Communion like was the beginning of this whole sort of new era in ufology, and for a lot of people really changed their lives. And here we are realizing that there probably is a big connection here. So I want to end on this note. We talked about Ingo Swann remote viewing the moon, and some things that are going on there. There's a channel, a YouTube channel that is I didn't know about until recently. And I'm going to see if I still have this window up so I can show you. That's Mr. Obnoxious. Let's minimize that one. This one is called Sweet Jesus Jones. I have so many windows open. It is unbelievable. I'm so out of time, but I'm going to keep going for just another minute because it's you guys. Not that one. I think this is it. Okay, here it is. Oh, and by the way, Whitley Strieber on this note, I'm going to show you one more thing. There's a great video, and you can find it on the UFOB subreddit. I'll show you this real quick. This is Whitley Strieber. Let's do, I think it was this one. There it is. And you can find this on UFOB, and I'll post it to the Team Night Shift Reddit as well. So here we go. I think it's this one. Whitley Strieber, there's a video of him getting his implant removed, or they attempted to remove the implant. So Whitley Strieber has an implant in his ear that he apparently got when he was abducted in the 80s. And he talks about this a lot. And there's footage of him attempting to have this implant removed. And what's interesting about this footage, and I don't have time to show you the entire clip today, but you can go watch it on the UFOB channel, or we'll cross post it. If somebody wants to jump in there and throw it up on the Team Night Shift subreddit, we can show it there. But the surgeon who's removing this implant says it's moving. They're talking about this implant, and it's moving away as they're trying to get it out of his ear. It's a really interesting video. But that's not the thing I want to show you. There is another channel called Bruce Sees All. Bruce Sees All. And this is, I was not familiar with this channel, but this guy apparently passed away. And there was a tribute to him on UFOB. Somebody posted this up, and I went to his channel and I was watching it. And this is the guy who has all of the footage of stuff going on the moon. And it's really weird. Watch this.
They are satellites. Well, then satellites they're flying on the surface like last moon phase.
Watch this. Now, it's very hard to see. I'm going to put this in the, I'll drop this in the chat. real quick, and I'll throw it in the show notes as well. So if you guys want to go directly to this video and watch it, you can see it here. But here we go.
For my 15 minutes. I only got 15 minutes of footage again this time, but there they are. They're
Look at these
flying around
dots.
again. Many different types of aircrafts or biological creatures. It can't be anything else. If they are satellites, well then satellites are one behind the other, and I know they are not. You can see them here. I got stars up around approximately where they are. I've enhanced it, over-enhanced it, and slowed it down so much for you to be able to see it. And now here you're going to see it passing through the magnifying lens too. There it is on the right side of the magnifying lens,
Right there.
going upwards. And once that one gets out of view, you will see another one to the bottom right entering the lens. Look to the bottom right now, and you will see one entering the lens. Again, this is just the beginning again, so you know what? There's air traffic on the surface of the moon. There it is, going down bottom left. Watch it,
Right
descending, descending. This is in the footage of the 24th this month. So the 24th of February, I also got footage of different areas. So you know what? There is a traffic flow on the surface of the moon. And this is the second month, same date, and there's just as much traffic.
Go check out Bruce Sees All YouTube channel and tell me what you guys think of this. I have seen clips from this channel before, but I didn't know what the channel was, and it's really, really interesting how this he's showing you shit on the moon, stuff flying across the surface of the moon that should not be there, at least as far as we're told, shouldn't be there. So I don't know. Ingo says there's stuff there. Remote viewing is real, turns out. Come to find out, Bruce Sees All and other people too. He's not the only one, but other people have shot footage of things passing in front of the moon that should not be there, and or over the surface of the moon. There's definitely something strange in our neighborhood, something going on behind all of this. And who knew? Dick Cheney sits at the top of it all. He's the one who knows it all. And if you know anything about Dick Cheney, if you lived through the Bush administration, then you know why he's the last person who should be in charge of UFO secrets. The absolute last person. He's more machine now than man. Twisted and evil. He also co-authored the Project for a New American Century, which is a crazy, crazy read. If you want to go read something that will just completely blow your mind. It was written in 1997. Dick Cheney was a part of this, and it was a neoconservative think tank that put together a policy paper on how we were going to reshape geopolitics in the next century. And it required, and there's a quote in there, I don't know if I have it ready to show you today, but it was they talk about they need a new Pearl Harbor, which would catalyze a shift in the mindset. And that catalyzation, that new Pearl Harbor event would allow the people in power to put through this new policy change and do a number of things throughout the Middle East that would change the regime in Iraq and do all these different things. Well, this was written in 1997, and the new Pearl Harbor was September 11th. That was the actual Pearl Harbor event. So a number of people throughout the years have suggested that there was some sort of a connection, that they knew in advance that this was going to take place, or they had planned it that way. And Dick Cheney was part of that process. So you can look up Project for a New American Century on Wikipedia. You can read it. There's also the on archive.org, which is linked to in the show notes. You can go there and read it. But yeah, that's who's in charge of the whole program, according to David Grush. Not for much longer, apparently. I don't know. So, final thoughts. What's going on? I think I'll leave it at this. I think that the push for disclosure is in full swing. It seems like the people in the know are starting to reveal more. I want to know more about Matthew Pines, what his deal is. This guy just sort of popped up out of nowhere, and he's dropping really interesting, detailed information with a lot of confidence and clarity of message. And I think that's really fascinating. So if anybody out there has done a deep dive into Matthew Pines, I'd be really interested to know what you found. And I'm just curious, what do you guys think? So on that note, I think we're going to go ahead and start to pack up for the end of the day. Thank you all for watching. Thanks for being here. Let's take one last look at the chat. Why does our moon not rotate? Night Shift, Chameleon UK, Sage Sleuth, and at Dolan's Bar donated to the channel, mate. Thanks, Brett. Thank you, everyone. Sage Sleuth, thank you for the is this a super chat or a thank you? What is this? Thank you, Sage Sleuth. Chameleon UK, thank you. Hit that like button. That's right. Please. Hit that like button. Share this video. Dolan's Bar. Oh my God, 1999. Thank you, Dolan's Bar. Great content as always. When in Philly area, stop in for a beer. It's on us. Hey, Dolan's Bar, did you catch me on Instagram? Is that you? I think I got a message from you on Instagram a while back, and let me know if that was you. Hit me up on Instagram again. You guys are great. This has been awesome. Look, I know these are a little disjointed. Doing live stuff is fun, and it's kind of all over the map, and sometimes we jump in here and just start talking and get going on different things and go off on a tangent, and we kind of go all over the map. But I think that's what makes it fun, and that's what's so exciting about it. We never know where it's going to go next. Seco Activo podcast. Much love, Clint. Thanks, Pavel. We need to do another one soon. I want to get with you and do, I don't know, we should do something fun. We got to figure something out, man, because I had a lot of fun in that last one. It was great. I really like where your head's at on all this stuff. I think that we share a lot of the same ideas. Yeah. By the way, the person who turned me into a pacifist hippie was an Army Ranger named Robert, who served in the first Gulf War and came back with PTSD and Gulf War syndrome. And he's the one who handed me a Noam Chomsky book, and he was like, you need to read Noam Chomsky. And this guy is the dude. It was an Army Ranger with who turned me into a hippie. That's kind of interesting. All over the war in the Middle East. Special thanks to our members. Of course, thanks to the mods. Thanks to Brett, Chris, Xander for the music, for the help. Xander's going to be, we're going to be doing some stuff live in the next couple of weeks here. Thanks to all of our channel members. We've got some new members that have just joined up. Let's see here. Where is everybody? Mads, Chuck, Super Freak, Beth, Casey, Rach, DD, SPAG, Matthew Cook, Attack Peter, Pope Tom Atkin, Johnny J, Polygon Panda, Constantine, Northern Monkey, Pat Berlin, Ket, Steve Burrows, David Voits, Deidre, Prickly G, Planet Algol, Chameleon UK, Alan, Tony Laycock, Sage Sleuth, Brian Solari, Edward Cox, Nidu, QB and SB, Mystical Wonderland, Edward Ruff, Matthew Orr. You know what? We need another outro. Here we go. Let's do it again. Chris Colin Lopez, Christopher Tucker, Sylvian Savard, Scott Cullen, D into House, End of Days. It's a great movie. Alexi Lindis, Ian Riley, Corey T, Stuntman, Random Content, Neil Daniels, Reign of Rain, Kurgan Cold, Alan Corin, Paris Diamonds, Bearded UFO Guy Gas, Scott A, Sage Wildheart, KT, Blood Willow, Producer Brandon, Brian Jackson, Mark Bates, Phi Trader, Avi Z, Chris Hovord, Packrat, Proud Vermin, Heather Willow, Joseph Christopher, A Huff, Christian Dane, Shadow Patriot Terry, Alminius, Dr. R Fuzz, Paging Dr. R Fuzz, Miss K, Goldbridge EMG, Zendra Zero, Charlie Fisher, Thistle's Last Stand, Teresa Bailey, Brett Higgins, Stephanie Erickson, Anthony Haley, and of course, last but not least, Corey Feldman. Thank you, Corey. Truth, justice, and the American way. Corey Feldman, big fan of the show. Actually, would really love to get Corey on the show. So Corey, please text me and let's hook that up. Thanks, guys. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and share. Go on the Discord. Join us over there for the conversations that we're doing on Discord. Go on the website. Check out the hats, the t-shirts, the merch. And I will see you on the next one. See you back here next week. Mondays and Fridays now. And yeah, got some good stuff coming. So thanks, everybody. I'll catch you on the next one. Until then, keep looking up.